Hello, this is Chris Curran. Actually, no it's not, it's me, Ralph M. Rivera. And I'm here to let you know that the new program of Podcast Engineering School is starting this January, and registration is open right now at podcastengineeringschool.com. I'm actually an alumni of Podcast Engineering School, and before I attended, I was the son of a poor cobbler. But now look at me, I'm editing this episode. That's right, I have podjacked this episode, or as Chris says, this session of the Podcast Engineering Show. And before we get started, I want to give you a quick rapid fire on my workflow. I edited this session in Hindenburg Journalist Pro, and I used a few plugins from iZotope, specifically RX and Ozone. I only used one de-esser.
Whoa.
Because I know that Chris, how many de-essers do you usually use?
70,000.
Wow. Okay, well, that seems like an unreasonable amount. All in all, I used about 4 plugins in each track, which I know is a lot less than what Chris usually uses. Chris, how many effects totally do you use on your tracks?
100 trillion.
Again, that just seems excessive and borderline irresponsible, but I guess that's how you do it. Anyway, Chris, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this show, and let's get started.
It's time. Apparently it's time to rock out.
Oh yeah.
Wow. That was more of like a yell and a grunt together, although I did lean back quite a bit. But anyway, welcome everyone to the Podcast Engineering Show. My name is Chris Curran. I'm happy you're here. And we talk shop on this podcast. We go really deep into podcast audio production, really deep. So if you just want to hear about plugging in a USB mic and pressing record, this is not the podcast for you. So we talk with guests who are really producing podcasts at a very high level. I actually have a company where I produce podcasts for clients at a high level. And I also run Podcast Engineering School. So anybody who wants to learn how to produce and engineer podcasts at that high level can check out my school. Of course, Barry's here with me.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh yeah, baby, he loves it. Check the website for the next PES semester. And I also do these daily goodie episodes in between interview episodes. So check them out if you haven't heard one yet. And if you do listen to the daily goodies or get them in your email, which is, it's like a little blog post I write every day, feel free to comment on the post or even reply back to me with your thoughts. Or if you have any suggestions of daily goodies that I could do, like any questions you have, I'll cover it in a daily goodie. That'd be kind of cool. So today, Marcus dePaula's here. He's an audio engineer, podcast producer, and website designer. That is the triple threat combination, Marcus.
I like to think so. But man, I got to say, it's really good to be here. I'm a huge fan of your show and what you do. You got those daily goodies, you know, lots of good stuff on those. I've learned a lot just listening to you and following you on Twitter and stuff. So
cool.
It's good to be here.
And so is there a pro wrestler with the name Triple Threat?
Well, there's Triple H.
Oh.
I actually did some wrestling gigs back in the day.
You did?
So we can talk. Oh, yeah. I did sound for WrestleMania 19, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, so
we got to get to that later.
Yeah, we can talk. We'll talk about that at the end. We'll go back to our old days of producing music and all that, because you have quite a bit of experience doing that, and mostly like live stuff, right?
That's right. Yeah, I did some studio installs after I retired from the road back in 2005. So
cool,
but mostly live engineering.
And your website is meonlylouder.com.
Yeah.
Me Only Louder. And you know, Ralph M. Rivera just loves that name so much. Did he get a tattoo of it yet, I wonder?
Not yet. I still need to give him one of my t-shirts too. But yeah, we've been hanging out a lot since he moved here to Franklin, where I live.
You're right in Franklin with him?
Yeah. We're just right up the road from each other. So.
Oh my goodness. Do you also drink expensive liquor and smoke cigars?
Only when I'm around him and Carolyn. But yeah.
Okay.
I enjoy a good beverage and cigars.
So this is going to be fun. And you just got back from DC Podfest. Although by the time this comes out, it'll be like a month and a half ago. But
yeah,
you had a good time at DC Podfest?
It was awesome. It was a great day. Lots of good people. Lots of good conversations. So I love the podcasting community.
Cool. Yeah, right? It's so much fun. So let's do the speed round. And of course, the speed round is where my guest is going to go over his entire signal chain. So from the microphone, where that's plugged in, your interface, how you're recording it, and then also real quick, just overview the your post-production. What programs are you using? How are you exporting it? And where are you hosting your files and all that? So give us the speed round, Marcus.
All right. Well, I am speaking through my beloved SM7b. I'm a huge Shure fan. I've got it attached to a Samson, I think it's a 38-inch boom arm, and I've actually wired the Mogami mic cable inside it with some low-profile connectors because I do soldering and stuff.
Nice.
And then that is plugged into my Sound Devices MixPre-3 first generation, which I'm actually looking to upgrade to the MixPre-6 2, so I can get some 32-bit float goodness.
Oh my!
Which we can talk about later.
Yeah.
And then that is plugged into my 2019 MacBook Pro 15-inch laptop.
Nice.
And I use Logic Pro to edit. I use the MixPre-3 to record. And then I also, for remote interviews and stuff, like right now we're using Squadcast, which I also use that for some of my clients. But for a lot of my clients, I also use cleanfeed.net, which is another service that has really clean audio. It just depends on the situation. But and then I have a control surface by Softube that's called the Console One that gives me my knobs to turn that I like to do since I come from the analog era of things like you.
Right.
We're old, but and then I also have an Audient ID14 that serves as my monitor control. It also has a couple mic pre's in it that can run my SM7B nice and clean, but I use it mostly as just headphone and speaker switcher, volume control. And then I have a pair of Rokit 5 KRK Rokit 5 Gen 3 speakers, which I'm actually not a fan of, and I'm looking to upgrade those to maybe some focals at some point. So that's my setup. Oh, and I also have a 4K LG monitor hooked up to my computer. So I use a dual screen configuration with my laptop below the 4K monitor so I can have like my plugins and stuff on that screen as like a heads-up display and then my editing window at the top. So
okay, so on top you have the big screen and that's where your editing window is, and then below that screen is the actual laptop, and on the laptop screen you have your like plugins showing, stuff like that?
Exactly. Yeah, the Console One has a really cool heads-up display with all the settings as well as a real-time analyzer so I can, do some visual EQing if I need to. So
the Console One, I haven't checked that out. It's just a MIDI controller?
It's a USB MIDI controller, but it comes with an emulator of the SSL 4000E console. So it has high cut, they call it. No, high cut and low cut, actually. So I just use the low cut or high pass, as I like to say.
Right.
It has a gate, and it has an EQ 4-band, and it has a compressor and a drive saturation knob as well, and obviously input gain, output gain. So it gives me analog control of the digital plugins, and it sounds fantastic and works great.
Wow.
And then they also have other plugins you can get, and you can mix and match. So it's like you can have, like I'm using actually the British Class A compressor, which is, I think it's supposed to emulate like a Neve compressor, and it sounds really good on vocals and speech. So I have that, but the rest of the channel strip is SSL channel strip.
And it emulates an SSL 4000E?
Yep. And they also have a 9000K you can get.
Oh. Yeah, I actually worked quite a bit on that exact console, a 4000E. Awesome. It was in Studio E at Soundtrack. It was this little room, and because it was such a little room, it was the control room itself was fairly small, and then all it had was a vocal booth.
Gotcha.
But the vocal booth was big enough where, like, if someone had to set up like a keyboard to play, or someone had an instrument, we could set them up in. It was a little slightly larger vocal booth, but anyway, really tight room. And I worked on so many projects in that room, and such a nice console.
Yeah, I did one of the last wiring jobs I did was for the patch bay of, I think it might have been a G series. I can't remember, but it was a big old SSL console. So had the huge like computer server rack in the other room that was really noisy for all the automation stuff with the kind of monochrome green and black screen.
Yeah. Yeah, oh man, those are the days. All right, so look, you were very kind enough to send me a big long list of all your equipment. So let's just go through. So you're using the Shure SM7b, which obviously it's a wonderful microphone. It's Bandrew Scott from Podcastage. It's his. Why did I butcher Podcastage? Podcastage. It's not hard to say. Anyway, he loves the SM7b.
It's kind of hard to say. I love Bandrew.
How long have you had that? And did you use any mics before
so I've had the SM7B, I don't know, for quite a few years now. I can't remember when I first got it. I actually just got my second one so I can have two of the same mic.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've tried everything. Like I have some clients that, per my suggestion, have bought the Telefunken M82, and I was going to get one for myself, which I love the way it sounds when you have the high boost enabled, as I do with the SM7B. But it's just a huge fat mic. I mean, it's really, really big, and you have to have the shock mount. It's like it's really susceptible to bumps and thumps. And I actually love your RE20 as well. I would love to get one of those at some point for myself, but I don't really need it since the SM7B works for me. I feel like the RE20 is like the flattest sounding of these style of dynamic broadcast mics. Right. But I like the SM7B because of the form factor, the integrated yoke and the internal shock mount and all that stuff. It's a little less, a little easier to work with, I guess, at a desk. So
you said you have the high frequency boost. I think it's like a high mid bump on the SM7B, right?
Yeah, I can't remember if it's like around 5K or something like that.
So it kind of boosts the presence, and it doesn't. It's not a shelving boost, so it doesn't boost all the high frequencies, just like a little bell curve.
Right, exactly. Even though the little graphic looks like a shelf boost, but it's actually not.
Oh, right, on the little switches on the back of the mic itself.
Yeah, yeah.
And the other switch on the back of an SM7B is the low frequency roll off.
Right, which is nice to have, but I don't use it because especially I have a low voice, so it rolls off a little too much for me, and I like to do it manually in the software. So.
Right. And so I wonder now what Bandrew would think about the SM7B with the high mid frequency bump.
Yeah, he doesn't like turning those on. Like I also interacted with him on Twitter last week when he did his big mega review.
Oh, jeez.
That
was awesome.
Was awesome. Yeah. I'm glad he did it because I don't have to now.
Exactly.
But I actually like the Telefunken. He doesn't. And I like it because of the high bump clarity thing, but it's also nice and full sounding. But
right.
It's a great kick mic. That's what it was designed for.
Right.
Which I've used RE20 on kick too.
Yeah, yeah. And so with the SM7B, you don't use the big monstrous foam windscreen, do you?
I don't, because I have inserted what's called a popper blocker. It's a little like $10 wafer of like mesh that's designed to go inside a microphone grill, and I've taken it apart and shoved it inside. I have to make sure I'm like right in front of it, because if you back away from it or get to the side, the windscreen won't work anymore because it's so small. But because of that, I don't need that big, huge additional windscreen, which to me, it cuts a little bit of the high frequencies.
Right. So the popper blocker actually goes inside the SM7B.
Yeah, it's like made for an SM58. But which is easier to just screw off. This one I had to like take a bunch of screws out and take it apart completely to get it in there. But it works nicely.
By the way, you said one of Ralph M. Rivera's keywords, so he has to drink. You said screw off, so. All right, Ralph's drinking now.
He has a lot of those.
Wow. All right. You also have two of these little mini short shotgun mics, the Audio-Technica AT875R.
Yes, and I have used those for a podcast that I'm doing with my wife called the Falling Low podcast, which is about her mother surviving an airplane that crashed into their farm back in 1968.
Oh, man.
So for like more documentary style, or where we're sitting in a room, I'll use those shotgun mics so that it doesn't feel like you don't have this big old black mic sticking in your face.
Oh, okay.
When you're talking, it can be a little bit further away.
Oh, so that's on video you're doing?
Well, we're not doing video, but it just makes it easier, a little less intimidating, and it's better than a lapel mic, which I know some people use for that kind of stuff too. So.
Right. And so shotgun mics are obviously very directional, and so do you have to be careful to stay in front of the mic and all that?
Absolutely. And it also picks up everything. Like, it doesn't pick up anything behind it. Like, it has great rejection on the back and sides, but it picks up like everything in front of it. So you have to make sure it's not aimed at an air conditioner vent or, you know, a window or something like that.
That's what I realized recently too with when I bought the 416 shotgun mic.
Yeah.
Like, it's very directional, but it's also super sensitive.
Exactly.
Got to be careful.
Thank God for RX-7, right?
Ah! You know, you bring up an interesting thought. When you record with condenser mics, the condenser mic, it picks up more clarity from the voice, right?
Right.
And it also picks up more background noise, right?
Yes.
So when you bring it in, or when you do denoise anywhere, when you use noise reduction of any kind with a condenser mic, you do reduce the noise, and you do also make the voice a bit more dull, but it already has quite a bit of clarity. So when you dull it just a little bit, it's still perfectly fine, usually.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point I hadn't thought about. Yeah. Starting with the crisper condenser mic that has a higher frequency range, you're not, you know, when it cuts that noise out, you're not losing as much the high end as you would like if I was to do a noise removal on my SM7B or your RE20.
Yeah. Oh, especially like, especially darker mics like the SM7B. Well, without that little high mid boost that you're using on the back of it, it's kind of a dark mic. I wouldn't call it dark, but darker.
Yeah, definitely. And the dynamics only go up to like 16K, right? As far as the frequency response or something like that. Maybe even 15. Yeah,
I'm not sure, but
because condensers go up to 20 or higher sometimes.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so yeah, the SM7B, of course it does. You know, I'm just for the listeners, I'll say that it does capture frequencies above that 16K, but just at a lower level, lower volume, so they're not as prominent.
Yes.
Yep. So yeah, all right. So you got the Sound Devices MixPre-3 first gen. That's awesome. So you have the limiters enabled, which I do too. And how much do you love those analog limiters? I want to give a round of applause for these limiters.
Absolutely.
Yeah, baby. Oh yeah. Analog limiters. Thank you.
Yes, which is different from the H6 that Zoom makes because those are digital, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Analog limiters are good because you can always clip the mic pre if you're not careful.
Yeah, analog limiters are great because no matter how much you turn up the mic pre, it will not clip. But a digital limiter like Zoom uses for the H6 and the H4n and all whatever, probably even the F8.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're digital limiters. So what happens is you crank up the mic pre, you distort the crap out of the signal, but then it limits that distorted signal. So that limited signal doesn't go over 0. Great, thanks.
Right, but it's still distorted.
Yeah, wonderful.
But that's not going to be an issue here in the future once everybody's on 32-bit float, which is why I want to upgrade.
All right, we got to talk about this. All right, everybody, hold on, I got to take a deep breath.
This is going to get really nerdy. I hope we don't lose people.
Actually, not too nerdy, but okay, so the Sound Devices MixPre-3 and MixPre-6 and also the MixPre-10T.
Yes.
They came out with 2nd gen, and it will now record in 32-bit float, which we all pretty much know 16-bit and 24-bit recording. That's fairly standard and well known. 32-bit float is much higher resolution. It's a 32-bit word each sample, and so the resolution's ridiculous. What are they saying about the resolution of these recordings, Marcus?
It's like infinitely higher resolution, basically. It's like crazy mathematically. It's like you can't even barely calculate. It's like millions of times higher, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, well, it's like it's a difference between 16-bit and 24-bit is huge.
Right.
Let's say 16-bit, let's say 70,000 possibilities.
Right.
That can be captured, meaning that's the resolution. But 24-bit is like 4 million states.
Right. That's already a huge difference. But this is like even way beyond 24-bit.
Exactly. So it's not, instead of 4 million, it's probably like 100 trillion.
Right. It's basically infinite is what they're saying.
Right. Which is, it's hard to comprehend that. That means Ralph can whisper really softly and then scream loud. Ralph doesn't scream though, actually.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, he's a soft-spoken guy. All right, so 32-bit float. And by the way, 32-bit float is whenever you import any audio files into software, like if well, maybe not your DAW. I don't know. Does a DAW convert all files to 32-bit float?
It depends. Like I know Audition does, and but I don't think Logic does. Yeah.
But like in an editor, like for instance, iZotope, if you bring something into RX7,
yes,
whatever it is, if it's an MP3 or a WAV or a FLAC, it doesn't matter. Inside iZotope, it'll convert it to a 32-bit float file. Right. And then whatever you do within RX7, it processes that 32-bit file because it's much higher resolution.
Yep.
And then you export at whatever you want to export.
Exactly.
All right, you have a 4-output headphone amp, a Monoprice?
Yes, and I use that just for when I'm recording clients all in the same room when there's more than one person so they can have their own volume control and all that stuff. So I come out of the stereo output on the left side of the MixPre into the back of that, and they hear the mix. And then I use the headphone on the right side of the MixPre for myself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, and it's like a little small headphone amp, nothing special.
Yeah, super portable, just volume. It does have, I like it because it has like a parallel in and out, so I can daisy chain them if I need to get another one at some point.
Oh.
Hopefully I won't be recording more than 4 people at a time.
Right.
That's right. Crazy podcast. But it has a mono switch, which is handy.
Oh, yeah, that is handy.
So I can make it mono. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Because a lot of them don't have that.
Yeah, yeah. That just and that's like a handy thing that you almost never use, but like the one time you need it, it's like a lifesaver.
Exactly. Exactly.
Feels like a lifesaver anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so you got the 2019 MacBook Pro with the 15-inch display, and 15-inch display, that's the largest display you can get these days, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah. Supposedly there's a 16-inch one in the works, but you know, it's who knows when
that'll
be out.
Wow, really gaining a lot of real estate there.
Right, right.
Because it's 1 inch on the diagonal, so it's even less.
Yeah. I actually used to have a 17-inch MacBook Pro when they still made those.
Yeah.
I still have it. It still works, but it's slow as molasses, but it's a beast, man. It's huge.
Okay, and this console one, we talked about the USB MIDI controller. What company makes that actually?
Softube, which I believe they're Swedish, and they do amazing emulations. They have their TubeTech channel strip on sale right now, and it's really hard for me not to shell out the $300 for that. So, yeah,
Softube, okay,
yeah, they make good stuff. They also make like keyboard plugins and stuff, or like synth emulators and that sort of thing.
Cool.
They have a really nice Weiss mastering emulator that emulates the really cool Weiss or Weiss, I don't know how you say it, mastering unit. It's like apparently identical to like the rack unit for mastering. It's like the super high-end mastering device.
Oh man, there's so many. I think one day, Marcus, me and you and Bandrew and like we'll get like 5 other guys and we'll rent a cabin in the woods for like a week and we'll all bring all our gear, all our plugins. Dude, come on.
Just all nerd out for a weekend. Yeah.
Dude, we'll do just like ridiculous tests of everything and
yeah.
Oh, man.
That'd be great. What does it take to get Bandrew to leave his house though, man?
I don't know. And we still don't know where he lives.
Right. He probably didn't want anybody to know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so you're using Logic Pro X and Adobe Audition. Wait, so which one's your main DAW?
Right. So I switched to Logic this year because for the Falling Low podcast, I had to do some music stuff, and I still have some of my templates for some of my clients in Adobe Audition. I've switched a lot of them over, but there's still this one where I did some time shift on the intro music just to slow it down just a little bit, and it's not possible to do that in Logic, so I'm still running some of those in Audition.
Well, you know what you could do? Well, you probably thought of this, but you could just render that music out of Audition. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just lazy. I just haven't done it yet.
Okay. So now you're mainly on Logic Pro X.
Yep.
And question for you, if you can answer this, you win a prize because I tried Logic Pro X for about 10 minutes, like about a year ago. And I literally couldn't click on the screen. Like I couldn't click on the where the tracks were. Like the main part of the screen where the tracks are. Like I'm like, oh, I want to put my cursor right here, and I click, and it does nothing.
It does nothing. Yeah, that's something that took me time to get used to, and you have to click in the time bar at the top, basically. Yeah, and then it also has the different states of what your cursor is doing, which one of the things I like about it is I can designate command click to be something, and I have it that designated to cut. So like instead of me highlighting and doing a ripple delete when I'm editing, I'll actually cut at the beginning, cut at the end, and then delete. I've got oh yeah, and here's another device I didn't mention that I use as part of my workflow. I have a Contour ShuttlePRO V2 that I use for my left hand.
Okay.
And then I'm using a Kensington what do they call it? Expert mouse, which is like a big trackball thing that you see in all the recording studios, big gray thing. Similar to it's like an older version of what Tom Kelly uses. Okay. And
that's on your right hand.
Yes. And it has 4 buttons, and I've got one of the 4 buttons. I've got left click, right click, and then the third button I have mapped to command click, which I have to cut. So I don't have to switch back and forth as to what my tool's doing. I can, use the left click for dragging and selecting, and then the right click for or the command click for cutting. Right.
Wow, that's cool. I think Jason DeFilippo also does like the two-handed, I think he has the same Contour ShuttlePRO.
Cool.
I might be wrong, but right? So is that something where like once you learn to use that and you get used to it, like you can never not have it?
It's hard. Like at DC Podfest, I was trying to show some of the people stuff in Logic, and I'm like, I don't know what to do without my the jog dial, because I use the internal jog dial as a zoom in and out, because I'm doing that all the time to find the places to cut, and then the ring around that is my scrolling, so I can just kind of scroll along in the session where I need to find the spot that I need to edit. So. And then I've got all the keyboard shortcuts for delete and select to end and solo and that sort of thing. Okay. Undo, redo.
So in Logic Pro, are you allowed to? Is there any limit on plugins, or can you go nutty with plugins and all that?
Yeah, there's no limit. I mean, it's pretty much like any standard DAW system. Yeah.
Right. Except for Hindenburg.
Except for Hindenburg, right.
Has a cap at 6 plugins, which by the way, 6 is quite enough.
That's plenty.
I mean, usually. And plus you can always do the old trick where you could subgroup it to another channel and then use 6 more plugins.
I had not thought about that, but yeah, that's totally true.
So it's not a deal breaker at all. It's actually just a minor detail, really.
Yeah, but if you're using a channel strip like my Console 1 or your Omni channel, the Shep's Omni channel, that's pretty much like 5 or 6 plugins right there in one spot. So that's one of the reasons I love those.
Yeah, but sometimes I really like using 9 compressors in a row. All right, actually, no.
There are some people that they will do that on a snare drum, like one of the guys I did an install. Well, the SSL guy that I did the patch bay for, he ran his snare drum out into 4 different external analog rack unit things, and then brought them all back in and summed them together.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was just like, did it sound good? Or did you hear
I don't know if it sounded, I mean, it sounded good, but I don't know if it, once you put it in the mix with everything else, if it's worth all that trouble or not. But
yeah, so that's the funny thing about mixing in the studio is there's a lot of tricks like that. There's a million little tricks like that, like, for instance, I've known engineers, let's just say that trick, run your snare drum through 4 compressors and bring it back into the console. Well, guess what? They might bring it back on a different channel and just add a little bit of it in to the dry snare.
Yes.
So you're going to jump through 9 hoops, and then you're only going to use a tiny bit of it in the mix.
10% of it. Yeah.
But that's what you do.
Yeah. That's actually one of the reasons why I liked live, concerts more than doing the studio stuff, because I didn't want to spend 45 minutes on one tom, just like boom, boom. It's like for a concert, you just throw all the mics up, put all the band gear up, turn it up, and then you just kind of go do the show, tear it down, go to a different city, do it the next day.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the difference. So in modern terms, like in creating videos for the internet, let's say, you can go live. Like you can go live on your Facebook page just with your phone with video, and you go live, talk for 5 minutes, and click stop, and that's it. You posted a video and all that.
Yeah.
Or you could set up 3 cameras in your house, 9 lights, and record, and then spend 9 hours mixing the video,
like Bandrew does.
But I think he's got some Alienware stuff going. I don't know. I think I don't know if he's human, actually.
Yeah, he's a machine for sure.
Well, because he even says at the beginning of all his videos, greetings, Earthlings.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
See?
He's probably not one of us.
I don't think he is. I don't think. I've never met him in person, but, I'll have to, like,
human.
When I meet him, I'll have to do, like, weird things like accidentally spill water on him and see if, see what happens.
if he squeals,
whatever. All right. So the Softube Console 1 with all the plugins, you can access all those plugins within Logic Pro, correct?
Yes. So I add that as one plugin to every single channel, and then that includes my high pass and the gate and the EQ and compressor and the saturation all in one thing.
Got it. And you're using iZotope RX7 standard. You love that?
I do. I actually will drop it into the standalone app, each of the tracks individually, and remove noise, adjust gain, do declipping if needed. There's one of my clients that's always clipping, even though I tell him to turn it down. And then de-reverb is another one I use a lot, because a lot of my business clients are recording in like conference rooms or offices that aren't acoustically treated. So and you have to be really careful with that one, because it can really jack up your sound if you're not careful.
Yeah, and the one cool thing in the de-reverb module in RX7, it has a little checkbox. It says checkbox to boost the dry signal.
Yes, which is nice. It's very,
which is nice. But I wonder if you have the same experience with that. So when I do that, it boosts the person's voice, right? Because that's the dry signal in this case, obviously. It'll boost the voice, but I feel like it boosts more low mids than like high frequencies. So it'll boost the voice a little, but it's just not as clear afterwards, which again, I can sort of add some EQ later to help with that.
Yeah.
But that, I don't know. I don't know if I'm hearing things. I don't think so.
Well, what threshold do you usually have it set at after you learn because I'll like learn the whole file.
Right.
I'll use
on the de-reverb, right?
On the de-reverb, yeah. I'll click the learn button, and it'll take like 3 minutes to learn a half-hour, recording. And then on my MacBook Pro, you have a Mac Pro, so you don't have to wait as long.
Yeah,
or
I was
iMac Pro.
3 minutes.
iMac Pro. Yeah, the laptop, and
that's not bad.
That's one of the trade-offs. But and then so I'll learn it, and then I will do a preview playback, and I'll adjust the threshold slider, and it'll typically end up being between 5 and maybe 8 when I do it.
You mean the amount of reduction?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So between 5 and 8, I'd say that's normal. I'd say somewhere in there. If you start going above 8, 9, 10, then you're
if you go above 10, then you really start to lose a lot of high end for sure.
Yeah, it sounds weird, but
it's a balancing act, just like any audio thing.
Yeah.
But
so I'm wondering if when maybe next time you're using it, click the boost the dry signal button, that little button, and see if you can hear if it, because I would think, well, I don't know, maybe adding high frequencies is more difficult.
Yeah. I'll definitely check that out though.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, and if you listening, because I know a lot of you are I was going to call them nut jobs like me and you. But that's not right. I don't want to call I don't want to say that to any of my listeners. You guys are crazy enthusiasts like me and Marcus. So if you have any comments on that, on the de-reverb, the boosting the dry signal button or the checkbox, whatever, let us know. And you have iZotope Ozone 8 Elements. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So that's a mastering plugin. And I forgot to mention that earlier. I use it on every single track as my limiter. And it's kind of overkill, but I love that plugin so much. It just sounds great and it's really hard to screw up. And it has that additional EQ. And the Elements doesn't have some of the nicer compression and stuff in it. So I only use the EQ and the maximizer. And then I have the meter on the maximizer set to register the LUFS instead of the RMS dB, so that I can kind of get everybody close. So I use it kind of like a leveler, which I don't really like using the leveler plugins because they're a little too severe a lot of times. And so with the maximizer, it just kind of gets everything at an even volume for me.
Right. Yeah, the maximizer within Ozone 8, I really like it too, and I usually use it on the master bus or on the vocal subgroup, whatever.
Yeah.
And there's like different types.
Right.
Or different, what would you call it? Not modules, different
like emulations, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's like IRC1, IRC2, IRC3, and IRC4.
Which
and
one
on the
do you use?
On the IRC4, which is the latest one, you can choose between like modern or classic sounding.
Right.
And I always choose classic because it just
me too.
Yeah. Okay.
The vintage stuff.
Yeah,
you got your vintage RE20 and we're old school.
Yeah, but it just sounds like the vintage one just sounds like I don't want to say beefier or like just I don't know, but the modern one is good too, but it's just a little thinner or something.
Right. Yeah, I feel like the modern stuff is cleaner. And it's also why I like using the channel strip EQ instead of like a super pristine, accurate EQ, because I want that color. I want that analog feel to it. The precision stuff is good for like removing mistakes or repairing things. But when it comes to shaping the sound, those kind of emulating the old analog circuits, that were sending voltages through capacitors and resistors and stuff, it brings life to things in a way that the precise, completely digital plugins can't do.
Totally. Yeah, lately I've been really messing around with FabFilter Saturn, which is a saturation plugin. It emulates tubes and tape and all different types of saturation. And it's really I don't know, like a person who's never heard actual analog stuff. Yeah. Like I don't know if they would hear the difference. I mean, they'll hear some difference, but I don't know what they would think. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Because you were working in the studios back in the 24-track tape days too, right?
Yep. Early 90s.
Biasing tape machines. I hated doing that. So
really?
much.
Oh, that's like one of the first things we learned is like how to align a tape machine. So you got to get the reel of tape with all the test tones, and then you got to get your this little tool where you literally on all 24 tracks you have to tweak the record level. Well, first you do the playback level. Right. And then the record level, and then the bias and all that stuff. And it's like it took you like 30 or 45 minutes to align a tape machine.
Yeah. Well, starting out, it took me like half a day the first time I tried to do it.
That was great.
Because, you got this big beast of a machine with all these meters on it sitting in the other room. So you have to make sure that your meters on the console line up with what's on the tape machine so that, you don't accidentally send too much signal to the machine so it clips,
Well, luckily the studios where I was, they already had that level set.
Nice.
So when I was aligning tape machines, I would just look at the meter on the tape machine itself.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And when I was at Quad, when I was an intern, the first time I did that, I started every morning. I was helping out this assistant engineer who was working on the record by Mark Cohn.
Nice. I love that record.
Rainy Season, I think.
Yeah, I used that for sound checking stuff, like tuning a PA.
That was so cool being there for that. Anyway, album. The assistant would ask me, hey, can you just, while he was setting up other gear, he'd ask me to align the tape machine because you can't really screw it up. I mean, it's it's not hard and you can't ruin anything. Yeah. So it's like, hey, this new intern, he just kind of showed me what to do and I just did it and so then every morning it would be my thing. I'd come in and I'd align the tape machine for the sessions for that album. So it's kind of cool.
Nice. Yeah.
And those
Kids
guys
these
were
days.
using some serious analog gear and
yeah.
And in the live room with the drum sets and the guitar, like that's a very analog record, if you know what I mean.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the 90s was like, to me, are the best sounding records because it was right before digital kind of took over. And a lot of the, you had all the analog outboard gear and the analog consoles, and the way everything was mixed, everything had a bigger dynamic range because everything, you couldn't use a compressor on every single thing all the time because they were expensive. It's like $2,000 per compressor. But now with digital stuff, you can stick 5 compressors on every input. That's why everything sounds like this big,
Right.
Anyway.
All right. So you're using the Audient ID14 USB audio interface.
Yeah, and it has Burr Brown converters in there, which is like a name you hear thrown around with some of the chip manufacturing things. And there are some people that say your AD converters and DA converters don't matter, and that's what turns, the analog waveform from a voltage into ones and zeros to those bits that we talk about, the bit rate and bit depth. It really matters a lot. It's probably one of the most important things as far as recording, and playback, can be important too for monitoring, but it's really, really important on the recording side of things. That's one of the reasons why I have no problem spending the money for the Sound Devices MixPre series of devices, because the higher end, the cheaper converters that you get, or cheaper devices that you get, they end up having really junky converters, and you end up getting jitter. It doesn't take as good as snapshots, and it's very inconsistent. So AD converters matter quite a bit.
Yeah, and I was just looking up this the Audient. It's $300, and it's just it's 2 inputs.
It's super
right?
cheap. Yeah, it's made in China, but it's designed in the UK, and it's Audient also makes consoles. Okay. And it's the same mic pre's. They have all the same mic pre's in every single device they have, including their consoles. And the mic pre's sound really good too. The mic pre's actually do color the sound a little bit. And I actually like the way my SM7b sounds better through the MixPre mic pre's compared to the Audient, but it still sounds really good in the Audient. And they're very quiet.
Right,
especially for a $300 device.
Yeah, well, it's like, so it's twice the price of a Focusrite 2i2.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically for the same amount of inputs.
Same I/O. Yeah, exactly.
So that's cool. Yeah, the Burr Brown converters. Yeah, converters. And there's also, I didn't prepare to talk about it, but there's another company that uses Rupert Neve transformers in their, it's an audio interface, like a small one like that.
Is it RME? Company. Not RME, is it?
I don't think it's RME, no.
Okay.
No. But anyway, sure. It's kind of cool that these, the companies are making interfaces at, a reasonable cost, like for the home musician, basically.
Right.
But with, better converters or better transformers, it's kind of cool.
Yeah. I'd love to get a UA, especially they just launched the new Twin X or whatever it's called. I can't remember. Yeah. I'd love to get one of those, but I don't have $700. I'd rather buy a, anyway.
Dude, I always want to buy
spending money.
Everything by Universal Audio. Well, as far as like the interfaces and the plugins and the plugin accelerators and all that. Like I always want all that stuff, but
yeah. Yeah, it's UA is like top of the line stuff, but it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
And their stuff works with my Console 1. The Softube Console 1 works with all the UA plugins, so it's kind of cool.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
So you can control the UA plugins from your little USB controller.
Exactly. And I can take the UA like compressor and insert it into my channel strip instead of the one that I'm using from the SSL or whatever.
You know what? I want to pull up a picture of this Softube Console 1 because I'm curious how many buttons are on it. Like, well, no, here I see there's there's like 20 knobs on it. So,
yeah.
Okay.
And then they just came out with a fader module too, which I also want to get. It's like all the stuff I want to buy.
Oh, so this is so like, wow. All right, so I'm gonna have to go to YouTube later and watch a tutorial for this console one because I mean I'm interested in controllers like these USB controllers that can control the software on the screen. I love that.
Yeah.
But I've never owned one, and I don't feel like I need one. But
right. It's definitely an adjustment, and it's more for people like us that are used to doing console things,
right?
And especially for live guys, because you have to, you know, with a live digital console, you could have 96 tracks, but your control surface only has like 32 faders or whatever, so you have to select which channel you're dealing with. And that's what this is like. You have to choose, like you can't click on the software and have the software automatically bring up that channel on the thing. You have to click a button on the control surface.
Got it.
Yeah. So it's a little, but for me, I'm used to doing that. But you can see like negative reviews of people like if they only had it to where you could click on the plugin and it automatically brought it up. It's like, yeah, that's a little tougher than you might think to do.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a workflow thing, but once you get the hang of it, then it's probably fine.
Right. And I'm only dealing with, you know, like 4 or 5 tracks total, including the music. So it's not like I'm bouncing around between 30 tracks.
Yeah. Or 150.
Right.
Some of these songs. Okay. You're using these Ultimate Ears in-ear monitors, which are
in-ear monitors.
So in-ear monitors obviously are mostly made for, you know, band members on stage.
Yes.
I mean, that's one big use for them, I guess.
Yep. That's why they were created, was to be used on stage.
Right. Because previously on stage, you'd have to have speakers. So next to the guitar player, there'd be like 4 huge speakers pointed at the guitar player's head. And out of those 4 speakers would be blaring the drums, the bass, the vocals. And then you go to the other side of the stage with the bass player, same thing, a bunch of speakers pointed at his head. Drummer, bunch of speakers. So what you had on stage, you'd have like 25 speakers cranked up loud just so everyone can hear each other. And that the totality of all that noise combined is so loud. And so the in-ear monitors was like magical, wasn't it? Like when you can just reduce that stage noise so much, right?
Exactly. And you can basically have like a CD quality mix for every single person on the stage that was stereo, instead of just getting things loud enough to where you could hear yourself sing. You could actually have like this nice, pleasant thing to listen to that was your custom mix.
Right. And then, of course, you can move around anywhere, and this mix is exactly the same.
Right. Yeah, they had little wireless belt packs that they plug into, and yeah, they can run all over, do whatever they want.
So now yours, are they custom made?
They are. Yeah, I had to go to an audiologist, and they filled my ear canals up with silicone, and then waited for it to harden, and then kind of pulled it out. It's really kind of freaky to do. And they still do that now. Like they've tried to do the 3D scan thing, but it's not quite as accurate as the silicone method.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
By the way, Ralph's drinking again. I just wanted to mention that. Anyway.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right, you get them custom made. And so do you use them these days for podcast production?
I do, because I share an office with my wife, and I don't want her to have to listen to the noise coming out of these podcasts. So they're more comfortable than my Sony MDR7506 headphones.
Okay.
They don't squish my ears, and they don't, you know, make the top of my head hurt after wearing them for a couple hours. I can wear them all day long. And
Got it.
Because they're custom molded to my ears, they're super comfortable and they don't hurt in any way. So it's not like earbuds where after half an hour they're kind of sore from the, you know, pushing on your ear.
Do they reject any sound at all from the outside?
They do. They reject, I think, 25 to 30 dB. So it's
Really?
like wearing earplugs. Yeah, yeah.
Whoa.
So I would probably be in jail right now if I didn't have these, because on flights, I would probably kill somebody.
Oh.
There's all the inconsiderate people making noise, talking too loud, or talking on their phone, you know. And when I used to fly all the time, you know, I used to be a very angry person. That's one of the reasons why I got off the road. Yeah.
I know, bro. I'm with you. I was too. Yep.
Yeah. So they definitely shut out a lot of noise, which is nice.
Cool.
No bleed.
And you mentioned the 7506s. They also block a lot of external noise as well. But they I don't use them. I have them. But they're tight on your head. Like they clamp on your head.
They are, yeah. And I just have them because that's what we always used to tour with, because they were the cheaper, you know, not really throwaway, but compared to like the ones you have, they're, you know, $80 to $100 headphones, right. And they would just get trashed on the road, but they still sound pretty good. So that's what we'd use for live, for cueing things. We need to listen to something closely. And I know a lot of studio guys that still use them in the studio, but they're definitely not the most comfortable headphones out there.
You know, I just realized while you were saying that the speakers that I have, these Neumann KH 120s.
Yeah.
I read reviews where guys would do live sound. They would use these speakers now.
Yes.
But they can't. But where do they use them? They can't have them right on the console in the venue itself because you wouldn't be able to hear them. Are they outside in a truck?
Sometimes. There's one of the guys that we used to provide. I used to work for Claire Brothers, which is now Claire Global, and there was on the Faith Hill tour a guy named Buford Jones, who was a studio guy. He would actually mix in the truck.
Got it.
Yeah. And yeah, so that was ideal for him. But you know, I know a lot of guys that will use them on the console, like you're saying. They just crank them wide open. And like back in the day, Mackies were the affordable ones that you didn't care if they got beat up. But there were some guys that took Genelecs out, and you'd have to turn them up really loud. Yeah, I never understood that either, but they did it so that they could have, like, they could cue specific things.
Got it.
To listen, and you know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if that's see that's the thing about engineers. Like, there's general ways to do things, but then every engineer kind of has their preferred way, and
exactly, it's
totally cool. Like,
yeah, there is no right or wrong way. Yeah,
the only thing is the quality of the final product. That's it.
Yep.
All right, so you got the KRK Rokit 5 G3s, and I've actually never owned KRKs. I see them in the stores and stuff, but they're okay. You don't like them so much?
Yeah, they're kind of like the basic starter studio monitors. Like, I know there have been some professional albums that were mixed on them. I can't remember which ones, but I think Jaquire King worked on them back in the day when he was starting out. But they're just a little too, especially for speech. They're great for music because they have a lot of low end. You don't really need a sub, and I do have a sub too, but they're just not very flat. They're kind of hyped a little bit in a bad way, like a little muddy for speech.
Dude, that's awesome. You have a subwoofer. You have a KRK 10S subwoofer. Now, how did you balance that? Because usually subwoofers have their own volume level. So how did you balance the volume, but the playback volume between your subwoofer and your two speakers?
Right. I basically just did it by ear because that's what we did in the live world back in the day.
Sure.
But I know you use like an RTA mic and all that stuff to EQ yours, right? That's what I should have done, to time align it and all that stuff. But I just kind of did it by ear. I messed with the phase and the placement and the volume and all that stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, if you just have two monitors, you know, left and right speakers, you can just set them up in a good spot and use them. That's okay.
Yeah.
I went a step further. Like, I just have the two speakers. I do not have a subwoofer. And then, yeah, I got from SonarWorks, I got the little microphone, and then they play tones, and you move the mic around your room, and then it comes up with an EQ curve for your control room, basically.
Yeah.
To flatten out the EQ of your speakers in your space. So, like, if I ever move to a different state, I'll just do that again, and then my monitors will immediately be this exact same EQ as they were here.
Yeah.
But when you add a subwoofer, that's a whole different animal, actually. I don't know if SonarWorks would work with that. I guess it would, but I don't know. See, when you get frequencies that low, it's not as easy as like mid-range frequencies, right?
Right. And not only is it the buildup of the low-end frequencies, it's also the timing of it. That's actually the most important part of it. So the positioning of it, and we dealt with this, you know, in PAs on concert touring all the time, because, you know, on tours you don't really have a choice where you put the sub. Sometimes they're, you know, 5 feet in front of the stage, sometimes they're underneath it. So you have to have a delay to be able to adjust the timing of it. And so you just hear this like ticking noise. It's like tick, tick, tick for like half an hour while they're time aligning the whole PA.
Oh my God.
So yeah. And then they do white noise like
right.
So yeah.
Yeah, well, oh man.
I haven't done that with this.
Yeah. Well, for a live venue, for like a live concert, man, like doing those basic things are so important, right? Because if you didn't, it would just sound terrible and everyone would be like, what the hell's wrong?
Right. Well, and there's also like 10 different zones with the speakers because they need to control, like, you know, now it's just single columns of speakers called a line array. And so, you know, they have different controls for the ones up at the top that are shooting all the way to the nosebleeds than they do for the ones that are down at the bottom that are just like 20 feet above the heads of, you know, the people in the front row. So there's a lot of EQing they do every day. It takes like an hour sometimes. So
here's my question to you. When I went in 1988 to the Monsters of Rock tour and I saw Metallica and Scorpions and Van Halen.
Yeah.
It was in Giant Stadium in New Jersey. And here, and this is what happens this is my question. In big stadiums, the people who sit all the way across the stadium are so far away that, like, I remember when Metallica was playing songs, I would be watching Lars and like he would hit the snare drum. Like I would hear the snare drum when he was kicking his kick and I would hear the kick when he was hitting his snare drum. Like my sight and my eyes and my ears were taking in different things. It was off. The sound was off with the picture.
Yeah. Light travels faster than sound.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but is there anything you do? I guess you can't do anything, right?
Yeah. So the practice nowadays, so it's the same for like the, you know, in DC when they do the inauguration or Times Square for the New Year's Eve celebration, they have delay towers is what they call them. So they'll have the main PA that's hanging in front of the stage that's doing the bulk of the work of getting, you know, moving air basically. And then as you go back, like every 150 feet or 200 feet or whatever, they'll put these little towers up on scaffolding or like little, you know, hanging off of the those lifts.
Right.
And they'll have them time aligned to the main PA so that the people behind those, and it's you know, it's usually just a handful of speakers, so it's not like the full-on wall of sound. You're getting closer to the stage, but it at least helps with the clarity of it.
Got it.
Because low frequencies also travel further than high frequencies. So the further you go back, the more dull it starts to sound. So the delay towers are mostly adding clarity.
Hey, and I also wonder, you know, on stage when they have the big video screens, like so the singer will be in the middle of the stage singing, and then on the big screens, let's say there's a big screen on the left, big screen on the right, you know, there's a camera zoomed in on the singer's face, and you see the singer huge. I wonder if they delay that video on the screen so that the people 600 feet away at the other end of the venue, so the sound is aligned with that the big video screen.
That's a good point. I don't know. I don't know if they do or not, but yeah. And there's definitely some also time alignment issues with video processing and transmitting it to the screens and everything. So it's just a big time alignment mess. Yeah, on all levels.
Just go to a small club.
That's right. That's right. Small clubs are the best.
All right. So you have some custom built acoustic panels. I think podcasters everywhere will be interested in this. You built a lot of them. What are they made of, and how did you build them?
So I got some wood and just some 1x4 wood and built these boxes that were basically the size of this material called Rockwool that is made to go inside the wall between, you know, standard stud bays and a wall, if anybody's done construction before. And they are 4 feet high and about 17 inches or 16 inches wide. So the panels with the wood, they end up being about 17 inches wide and 4 feet tall, a little bit more than 4 feet tall. Right. And I wrapped them in felt fabric because it was the cheapest thing that didn't look cheap.
Okay.
And, you know, it's not like the typical, the actual acoustic fabric that you see like these manufactured panels use is actually very expensive because they have to like fireproof it and all this stuff. And yeah, so I just went the cheap route. But yeah, I spent like totally about $230 to build 12 panels. And I built 12 panels because that's how many pieces of this insulation came in a package. Right. So instead of spending $250 for 2 panels, from like GIK Acoustics, which I've had clients order from, which is actually a good deal. I have 12 panels now that I hung around the room. So,
and are they heavy?
They weigh, I think, about 17 pounds. I think I weighed them. Yeah.
Each one?
Each one. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So they're pretty good.
That's good. It's funny that, yeah, like the weight. So the Rockwool that's inside, the insulation that's inside, that stuff's pretty heavy, isn't it?
It's pretty dense. Yeah. It's more dense than fiberglass. Yeah.
Right. Because normal insulation
absorbs quite a bit more, than normal fiberglass stuff or some of the like RLX panels that you would order.
Yeah, because it seems like the weight of it is a good telltale sign that it'll block more sound. It just seems like if something is really light, you can just feel that sound is just going to go right through it.
Right, exactly. And the thickness of this too, like it's almost 4 inches thick. It's like 3.5 inches thick. That helps with the lower frequencies because a lot of those Orlex panels are only like 1.5 or 2 inches thick, and they do a good job with the upper mids and high frequencies, which is what you need for voice, but they don't absorb as much of the low frequencies.
Right, low mids, right?
Yeah. So the thicker, the better.
By the way, Ralph's drinking again, just so you know.
Yeah.
You mentioned something, so anyway. All right, so now where do you have these panels installed in your studio? Did you nail them to the wall? Where are they?
Yeah, I got these little like picture hanging brackets that are like heavy duty. I think they call them a French something or other, French cleave. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, so they're hanging. I've got them spread out evenly on the walls, on two of the walls, the long walls, and then I have one on the ceiling above my desk and my wife's desk, kind of spaced out on our side of the room, on our half of the room where our desks are.
Okay.
And then I also have one kind of behind me up against the bookshelf, where my monitor would blast right into and reflect back.
Right.
So they're just kind of spread around the room. And again, the Rockwool, if you were to like cover the room completely with the Rockwool, it would just sound like really, really muffled.
Muffled.
Yeah.
So the difference between the before and after difference, before installing these sound panels and after, is it substantial?
It is. Like even my mother-in-law, who knows nothing about sound, she walked in. She's like, "It's really quiet in here." I'm like, yeah.
Cool. Did she clap? You're like, my mother-in-law. Are you an engineer?
No reflections. Yeah.
She's clapping. She's
That's right.
She's commenting on early reflections.
Yeah.
Well, dude, so regarding stories from on the road, I'm curious if any, like you're setting up to do a live show in an arena of some kind.
Yeah.
Like, is there ever any tragedies that happen? Well, I guess some shows don't start, they start late. Is that because the sound guys are like, they screwed up and they got to fix something?
Either the sound guys or the lighting guys or the set guys, like that. There's just so many moving pieces. The lighting guys actually have the hardest jobs. They have the most stuff to set up. Like every single light fixture has to be, addressed and then focused and all that stuff.
Oh,
but sometimes there's set problems. It just depends. Yeah. Sometimes with the audio, it's if an amp goes down or some processor or something, and you have to try to find one locally or have them, same day deliver it to you if they're in the a close enough area.
Right.
Yeah. Or there could be RF wireless issues to where your microphones aren't working. So I was out on the Dixie Chicks tour, and they had like 80 channels of wireless stuff. There was one guy that's all he did all day long was making sure that all the wireless stuff worked between their instruments and their in-ear mixes and the microphones and everything. It was a nightmare.
Wow, you must have to use such high-end wireless gear to make that work properly.
Yep, and there's like software scanners to where you can see where the holes are. There's certain cities like in DC, there's so much wireless stuff going on there from radio communications and stuff. There's not a whole lot of room left for audio, and it's getting smaller. They're selling off the open bands to cellular companies.
Oh my God. So what about making sure there's no feedback, right? From let's say a singer singing in a mic. How do you make sure that mic doesn't feed back?
Yeah, that was my job because I was a monitor engineer. You know, like you talked about earlier, switching to in-ear monitors helps a lot because there's not those speakers on stage.
Right.
But there are some artists that insist on doing, you know, the floor stage monitors.
Really?
We call them wedges because they're shaped like wedges. Yeah, because it just feels better. Like having stuff in your ears when you're trying to sing is kind of tough to get used to. And so it just feels nicer. You kind of feel the air moving.
Oh,
but it's
right.
yeah. But you have to EQ, like it's a lot of EQ. That also taught me not to overcompress things, because when you compress something in a live scenario where there's open mics in front of speakers, it actually increases the susceptibility for feedback.
Right.
Because of that, the way compression brings up the lower, you know, volume stuff besides tamping down the higher volume.
Right.
Yeah.
And did you also gate microphones?
Not usually. We'd gate drums, you know, just to keep the the floor tom from ringing out all the time.
Right.
You know, when he was hitting the snare kick or whatever. But gating a vocal mic never really helped. There was one band I toured with where the keyboard player, you know, he had the B3 organ in front of him and then the Wurlitzer on the left, and he sang a lot. And instead of eating up 2 inputs on our analog consoles before we had unlimited channels on digital, we wired his 2 microphones into one channel, and then there were these light, infrared gates, so that when he was not in front of the microphone, it would mute it. And so you'd basically plug it into the back of the microphone. And so when he was sitting in front of the other microphone, the second microphone wasn't picking up all the stage noise.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was the only kind of gate we used on vocals back in the early 2000s.
The infrared gating on vocals, dude.
Yeah. I don't even think they make them anymore.
Ralph's going to want one. Yeah, man, it's just fascinating. Did you ever do sound for a Guns N' Roses concert when Axl just threw it down and canceled the show halfway through?
I did not, but the company I worked with merged with another one, and they had one of the early digital consoles that was, well, it was a digitally controlled analog console. It was this company called Shoko, and they sounded fantastic. And there were 5 of these consoles in the world, and one of them was being used for Guns N' Roses in Canada somewhere. I don't know if it was Toronto or another big city like that, but he canceled that show, and they rioted and they trashed this basically priceless console.
Oh, wait, the big Canada one when they played with Metallica?
Yes.
Okay.
That show was the company I worked for, and they had this console that was basically priceless that got obliterated and basically turned into spare parts.
What a tragedy.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Axl.
Jeez, man. And as far as loudness, what's the average loud, like the engineers who are mixing the show live in an arena, like how loud do they turn up the speakers?
It's interesting because LUFS is a new thing for me as a live guy and as a music guy. Like me, I don't think I've heard anybody talk about LUFS in the music world. Have you?
No. Well, I haven't been really in touch for
it's been a long time,
years,
yeah.
But yeah.
But back in our day. But yeah, so you're looking at dB, you know, instead of the loudness, which is not as accurate overall but
when you're hearing noise travel through the air, dB is the correct,
right.
You know,
that's the energy
way to measure it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So typical concert usually was around 110 dB.
110.
And I think C weighted, whichever one is the lower, ends up being the lower average. I can't remember the difference between the two, A and C. But yeah, 110. The loudest show I did in a club that I worked at was 114 dB, and it hurt.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was inside a closed space. Outdoors, you can get away with a lot more because, you know, the sound just goes out.
Right.
But if you're in a closed space, it's like bouncing all around inside, and it's
right.
just a lot of energy that your head is absorbing.
Yeah, outdoor is a completely different animal, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially on the low end, because you're moving air, and if the low end is contained in a space, then you feel a lot more of it inside than you would outside. So you have to have different subs, even like there were some horn-loaded subs that got used a lot for outdoor concerts.
Because you need more subs.
You need more air movement. Yeah, exactly. More energy to push out.
Wow. So did you start doing live sound in like small clubs for bands and then kind of get hired by Clare Brothers and all that?
Yeah, I started out doing sound at the college that I went to here in Nashville when I moved here in '93, Belmont University. And it was basically like I had to do like 6 or 7 concerts every week for the students. You know, they did their recitals.
Oh, cool.
But it was like a, commercial music program, so it was like a proper concert with really bad music.
Yeah.
But it was a good experience. And then I volunteered for a gig in town, helping with a festival thing. And the guy's like, "Hey man, you're a hard worker. Why don't you come help me with this other show?" And it just kind of snowballed from there. Like my name started getting passed around. And then I got the gig at Clare Brothers and started going on tours with that. And yeah.
Cool. And another question about like doing, like mixing the sound in an arena and like a concert. Like there's obviously the mixing board that the person who's mixing the show is, has all the faders and all that. But how much outboard gear do they have there? Like compressors and EQs? Like are they stacked up with a bunch of processing?
They were back in my day, but nowadays it's all plugins. They actually use Waves plugins because they're using Avid or Yamaha consoles, and you can actually use Waves plugins with them. And Waves has live licenses where you can handpick like just a dozen or so, plugins to use.
Wow.
But yeah, back in the day, we used to have racks of stuff behind us and next to us and underneath the console with EQs, and reverb was a big one as well, and compressors for days, all kinds of compressors. And
yeah, explain reverb, because you're in a live space. The sound has its own natural reverb. So how are you using reverb?
Dry vocals with a singer, it allows you to hear, even in a room where the room has an echo, you can hear like every single mistake that so the reverb kind of smooths it out a little bit and kind of, like photoshopping with the airbrushing. It's like airbrushing for sound.
Okay.
Is what reverb is. And especially with drums, like you want that kind of, smack on the snare drum and stuff. Dry drums are not very fun.
I noticed this when I was in high school and after high school, when I was playing in some, hardcore bands, metal bands. We would go play live and we didn't have, even my drums a lot of times weren't even mic'd up. Sometimes the kick and the snare, they'd put a mic on.
Right.
But like there was nothing. And it just sounds like, it sounds so weak and, but then you'd go to a show, even in a small club, where they have a real person doing real sound and everything's mic'd and it's mixed. It just sounds like a billion times better. And that was always like a frustration of mine, because even back then I could hear that. I knew something was different. I'm like, this is why we don't like sound that good.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's hard to, you're a band, you want to sound awesome and play cool stuff and rock the house, but you just don't sound that good. And
you can't do it with one microphone.
Yeah. I don't know. So Marcus, this has been awesome, man. Anything we forgot to discuss?
Oh, I'm sure we could keep going for days.
Well, that's the thing. I was like, well, we got to end it somewhere.
Right. That's right. No, I think we covered quite a bit.
Well, this has been great. Marcus dePaula, audio engineer, podcast producer. Everyone go to meonlylouder.com. That's right, meonlylouder.com, and find Marcus on Twitter as well. So thanks for coming on the show, Marcus.
I appreciate it, man.
And you know what you have to do.
I do.
Okay. See, he does. All right. And everyone in your car, wherever you're listening, you have to yell, sound great. And yes, we are going to listen to the whole song in the outro today, everybody. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Go. Sound great!
You walk away from me well, and you can't play that part so well. Why do you play it out on me now? You like to lose control well. It's quite a feeling, isn't it? Let them float and rip it down now. You tell me Does it feel